When you want to pierce directly into the truth, your self perception will gain you a vision unlike anything else in this world. In fact, the more clear you are within yourself, the more almost seemingly obvious everything else in this world becomes. Now, I imagine you've landed on this video because you've already invested time, focus, and energy into refining your ability to perceive truth within you and around you. And through the course of this video, I'm going to share with you a few more keys and one of the very clear ways that I have been able to guide others to deeper inner knowing, as well as being able to perceive others' true intentions through a very simple series of steps. Now, I'm Danielle Lynn, True Self Alchemist, and for many, many years, I have immersed myself in understanding human behavior, spiritual knowing, and practical practices that have allowed me a pretty cool mapping that, once again, I'm about to share with you right now, that you can apply to personal relationships, professional relationships, or simply to having a deeper connection within yourself. So I'm imagining in part you've probably drawn to this conversation because you are aware that there's parts of you that are rattling the cage, so to speak. I see you claiming your voice. This is what I see. I see you claiming your voice, but there's still a part of you that's very loving. There's still a part of you that's incredibly loving, and so you're reconciling these elements of self between rattling the cage or feeling the way you feel, claiming your voice. The wonderful news is there is ways to, we'll use the word healthily, to healthily step into your self-empowerment without needing to explode on yourself or everyone around you. But it does involve consistency. And sometimes it involves space. Sometimes it involves space between you and the perceived others. We're at a juncture in reality where your discernment, your ability to see beyond the external stories is one of the most key, one of the most empowering ways you can move through this reality right now. And it includes not only seeing beyond what anyone seemingly outside of you is presenting, it starts with being honest with yourself, because you're the foundation of your own perception. How you are observing and filtering things in your life is going to color and paint what you receive and perceive. Now, self-honesty is often rooted in your willingness to have a sense of emotional and mental maturity. So, a willingness to introspect, reflect, do things like shadow work and the individuation process. And what that specifically means when I say things like shadow work, it's your willingness to look at parts of yourself that normally hide in the shadows. It begins and ends with you, how you keep commitments to yourself, but also how you introspect. And you see, one of the reasons why self-honesty is so key is because when you actually see yourself with clarity, this diminishes the ability for external things to hook into you. And we'll get to that in a moment. So the next step would be being willing to see things exactly as they are. So instead of looking at things from rose-colored glasses, or instead of looking at things from dirt-colored glasses, when you have a relationship of self-honesty with yourself, this extends to your worldview, because you're no longer attempting to either hide from painful stories, nor are you attempting to use optimistic stories to cover up wounding. You're just meeting the moment and meeting yourself as you are, in perfect imperfection. When you start engaging in personal honesty, self-responsibility, you can now start bringing these stories into the field of inquiry as well. And you start realizing that even seemingly loving stories can sometimes be constrictive of you actually experiencing reality for what it is. Because whether it's a negative story or a positive story, as long as you require it to exist, on some level it's constricting. So I'll offer you that as a little bit of food for heart. So now that you're being honest with yourself, now that you're observing reality with more neutrality, now you can start bringing others into the view. So we're going to define others as anyone who you have relationships with or that you're connecting with. Now, one of the tricks people play with themselves is they imagine other people are working from the same value system or the same game that you are. You yourself have your own values, your own reasons why you connect to someone or something. And when you assume another one has the same values as you, that can often be rooted in a desire to see things how you want them to be rather than necessarily observing them from the root of what they are. I'm not saying other people can't have the same desires as you. I'm saying that the closer to your heart something is, the more that you might want or need it to be a certain way, the more likely you are to self-deceive. Because anything we're attached to, if we're attached to a person being a certain way for us or needing to show up a certain way, if we're attached to a story about us and that other person, that opens up a room for us to be in self-deception, because it would likely mean that there's an answer we prefer, which might mean that we'd, one way or another, lean our biases towards believing something. I understand that can be an interesting or sticky thing to look at, but there's a gift in all this. There is a gold within all of this. If you are able and willing to sit with the knowing that you might have perceptions that are skewed, just that they might be there, that can allow you the ability to open up the range of your field of view to what's going on. It's actually one of the reasons why it can be easier for us to observe the dynamic in a friend's relationship and go, why can't she see that? Or why can't they see that? It's because we are distant enough not to be attached to the situation, so we can observe it for what it is and see it with clarity. In a similar way, we can actually invite that kind of dynamic into our own life. But once again, it involves radical self-honesty and a willingness to see things as they are. If you can be in a truly neutral place, if you can observe without judgment, and this is key here, it's discernment without judgment. It's not about making other people's things right or wrong, but it's just about looking at what's going on, being able to witness behavioral patterns beyond grand gestures, beyond words, beyond what people think they're doing, say they're doing, and simply observe what is the consistent patterned behavior. People's repetitive behaviors, patterns, focuses are going to tell you a lot more than what their speech alone tells you. And when you're willing to see it clearly without taking it personally, you can often understand the deeper nuances of why people choose what they choose. You know, a lot of stories go into that. Like they do these villain backstories. Oh, a tragic villain. Like this is what drove them to do that in the first place. Or here's what inspired the hero to make that choice, and so on and so forth. But something that's key to understand is, even if a person has a seemingly, let's say, justifiable reason, a very sad backstory as to why they have a certain behavior, something to keep in mind is this doesn't mean you must say yes to a certain behavior or pattern in your life. And I feel like sometimes people conflate love with a willingness to allow others to trample their boundaries. Some people may not even actually define their inner boundaries, which is sometimes a result of feeling fear of rejection or aloneness, because one can sense that if you uphold boundaries, certain people might actually leave your life. And consciously or unconsciously, you might cling to these people and tell yourself why it's okay to set aside what's important to you, or they're just figuring this out, or this or this. But what we do is, when we do a pattern like that, is we are actually operating from a leaky bucket energy system. We're not respecting our inner yes. We're not respecting our inner authority. We're saying yes to imbalanced relationships. We're perpetuating systems that aren't really serving anyone. And it does take a certain level of self courage and self honesty to shift from that pattern system, especially because many times these patterns can actually be rooted in family systems, which is, talk about a sticky place to meet patterning and energy. This is one of the reasons why a deep dose of self love is the foundation here, because you start to understand that beliefs such as I always have to put family above me, or I have to always be nice or give of myself and everything. These are beliefs that you can examine at any given point, and you can start asking yourself, if you are honest with yourself, how do you feel about those beliefs? Because I often find that behind many of the seemingly nice or giving people, there is this seething rage. There is a rage that is just underneath the surface of that smile, because there is this sense of being taken and taken and taken from, and that rage can come through actually as collapse. Sometimes people don't recognize it that way, because what they'll do, since they don't want to lash out, is they'll sometimes collapse their own energy. But if you start getting in touch with that power, with that collapsed power, it might come forward as a certain kind of rage, because when we suppress our power long enough, it usually builds up as some kind of, it's like almost like a volcano. It has a certain kind of build up point. But that might be a delve-in topic for another time. What I will say is that if you experience any of this inside of yourself, it can be an indicator that you're suppressing your voice. You're suppressing your power. And it has been my experience that no one benefits from you doing that. Not you, not anyone that you think you're benefiting by doing that, by keeping yourself small. You'll know this for yourself. For now, I'm going to just invite you to go to the rest of the list, because we have a few more items here. So, understanding, once again, what others' games are, what matters to them, this gives you a clear picture. It's really key to not assume that everyone values the same thing that we do. And hoping and wishing that someone you care about values what you value is just a way for you to potentially self-deceive. So you can observe what other people value through what they consistently focus on and through what they prioritize with their energy, time, and attention. Beyond any words, you can observe. That will give you a very clear picture. Now, when you do observe, when you come to an understanding, one of the keys here is, I'm not suggesting you use that or anything as ammunition, because if you bring stuff like this, the lady on YouTube said this, and here's what I saw of you, confrontation in those ways doesn't exactly get people to shift their gears. Right now, what I'm sharing with you is a way to observe, so you can decide for yourself what is a yes or no. And then if you like, you can set clear boundaries for yourself. You can lovingly communicate those boundaries, and you can decide whether or not you are going to enforce them, which is not about policing other people's behavior, but it is about making distinct choices for yourself and then making movements, if and when those boundaries aren't met, to put yourself in consistent environments that do honor those boundaries while still respecting what anyone else chooses for themselves. And this is one of the keys of boundaries, It's not about enforcing other people's behavior around you. It's about you understanding and adhering to the ecosystem that is a yes for you, inviting others to join you if they like, and if they don't like, for you to take the steps that allow for you to then flourish in a more reasonable, sustainable, equitable ecosystem. And this is where things like reality creation can come in, because this is where you break down the ideas of the belief structures of what's possible or not possible for you. You start to go all in with cultivating the energy of what is a yes for you, and then you'll start seeing doors open up. This is where you free yourself from the idea that you're tethered to anyone else, and you start reaffirming your connection within your heart-gut system that starts showing you the way. It's powerful stuff, my friend. So beyond observing others, you move beyond judgment. You truly observe. You discern. Like I said, when I was talking about boundaries, you use discernment, not judgment, because judgment will shut down your own willpower as well. Because judgment's a double-edged sword. Whatever you judge outside of you is also simultaneously being judged within. And when we make it right or wrong, we collapse potentialities for us. As an example, if you judged like everybody who eats pizza is a bad people, anyone who does that, boo, right? When you do that, maybe for a while that's true for you, but then if one day it becomes authentic for you to try pizza, now you have a not just a belief, but a belief with a lot of tension behind it. In order for me to now eat pizza, that means I'm a bad person, or you have to unravel that belief. When it's just a no, when it's just a no, pizza's not for me right now, it doesn't have to have the right or wrong. It's just a discernment and understanding of what is for you. But then in a new moment, you can be like, yes, pizza is for me to try right now. Very interesting. And then you move forward. This is one of the differences between the power of using discernment and judgment. With all of that, you can then get really clear on relating to yourself, what matters to you in relationships and connections, what matters to you when you connect with yourself, because this is also what you're drawing into in connections with others. And if you're really clear on what is a yes for you and what is a no for you, ultimately, others will not have the conscious or unconscious power to hook you in. And that doesn't just include relationships, that can include any kind of energy hook in your life. One of the main ways that marketing in general works is it hooks on your hopes or your fears or anything it is that you put out there. Anything it is that you put out there. And at least when I'm describing this, I'm describing, we're going to call it fear-based media marketing that uses non-consensual hooking. Now, there are ways to authentically market. There's ways to market from coherence. There's ways to market from magnetism, and which I find personally much more cleaner and clear and creates such a more dynamic connection. And I believe that that's where we're headed more and more. And one of the reasons that I felt inspired to share this particular video and this message is because whether you're dealing with yourself or with personal relationships, or whether you're navigating this world and the messages it's sharing with you, when you cultivate this level of self-awareness, you are really equipping yourself with the ability to be guided by your inner guidance system. Less and less are you putting yourself consciously or unconsciously at the mercy of whatever loudest voice is showing up. And more so, you're able to follow the rhythm of your own inner yes, of your own golden path. And the beauty of that is I find it leads to prosperity for us all. I find that in many ways, shape, or forms, it leads to more and more synchronistic connections, outcomes, partnerships, business deals, whatever it is. And so, my friend, a few final thoughts for all of us before we close today's conversation. So, as you have this self awareness, as you're shifting from being hooked in to being in more of a deliberate creator place, remember that you can invite others to join you without expectation. Remember that you don't have to grasp at others. If you are standing in your inner coherence and alignment, you will have a magnetism that draws the resonant people, the resonant support in. And most importantly, you will understand and naturally feel inspired to take action or rest when it's aligned for you to do so. Because it's not about having to wait for the perfect moment. It's about being very present in the moment, which contains within it any and all instructions you need on how to live coherently as yourself and prosper. And so, my friend, if you feel inspired to go deeper with this or anything else, I invite you to check out my description link. At the time of recording this, I have a very rad container going live. And there are also links in the description to the flow book, as well as some other opportunities if you'd like to check them out. In all cases, I'm very grateful for our time together, and I am looking forward to our next conversation.